Welcome to WikiPodcast. Today we're going to really get into how our minds work, looking specifically at something called cognitive distortions. These are, well, basically thinking errors. Those thoughts that pop up and feel totally true, but maybe they're a bit off
Yeah,
or exaggerated.
right, like mental glitches almost. They can trick us into seeing reality inaccurately.
Exactly. And we've got some great information here to help us unpack what they are, maybe why they happen, and how understanding them can actually be a real game changer for your well-being.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our mission today is to give you a clear picture of these mental traps and maybe some first steps for spotting them without, getting bogged down in technical stuff.
Sounds good. So let's jump right in. What is a cognitive distortion, basically?
Well, at its heart, it's a thought pattern that makes someone misinterpret reality, often in a negative way.
Right, and these distorted thoughts can really fuel feelings like depression and anxiety. It's like they reinforce negative emotions and thought.
It makes sense, like having a built-in negativity filter that just skews how you see yourself or your future or, well, everything around you.
That's a good way to put it. And this isn't exactly a new idea, is it?
No, not at all. We can look back to Albert Ellis in the 50s. He developed the ABC technique activating event, irrational beliefs, and consequences.
Ah, yes, the ABCs.
He really highlighted that it's often our interpretation of events or beliefs about them rather than the events themselves that cause the emotional fallout.
Precisely. It's less about what happens to us and much more about how our mind processes it. And then Aaron Beck, he was practicing psychoanalysis and he started noticing these automatic negative thought processes in his patients.
Automatic, like they just happen without conscious effort.
Exactly. And he noticed they were often directed against themselves, the patients, and they weren't really based on, objective reality.
Mm.
Beck believed these negative thought patterns, he called them negative schemas, are a big contributor to emotional difficulties.
Schemas, like underlying patterns.
Yeah, like deeply held beliefs or frameworks that shape how we see things, often formed early on. And these schemas act like filters, making those negative interpretations more likely. He even came up with the idea of the cognitive triad.
The triad, what's that?
It focuses on negative views about three things: oneself, the future, and the environment or the world around you, like a loop of negativity.
Okay, so Beck really focused on these thought patterns, and then David Burns, who was ex-student, he took these ideas further.
He did. Burns wrote Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy, and that book really popularized these concepts.
I've heard of that one.
He provided really relatable examples of cognitive distortions and, crucially, how to tackle them. He made Beck's work much more accessible for, everyone.
That's great. So let's talk about some of the main types. What are some common ones?
Well, one big one is all or nothing thinking, sometimes called black and white thinking.
Right, seeing things in extremes. Like if you make one tiny mistake, you think, I'm a total failure. No room for shades of gray.
Exactly. There's no middle ground. It's either perfect or a disaster. This often comes from, a deep fear of not being good enough.
Yeah, I could see that.
What else? Another common one is jumping to conclusions. This means assuming something negative without much or sometimes any evidence.
Okay, and that shows up in a couple of ways.
It does. First, there's mind reading, believing you know what someone else is thinking and usually assuming it's negative.
Like someone doesn't text back right away,
Yeah.
and you instantly think, oh, they're mad at me.
Right. Without considering they might just be busy or their phone died or anything else, we often default to the negative assumption, maybe reflecting our own worries.
Makes sense. And the other type,
Is fortune telling, predicting a negative outcome like it's already a fact.
so thinking things like, I'll definitely mess up this presentation, or I'll never find someone.
Exactly. You're predicting failure before you even start. It's like setting yourself up for it.
And related to that is labeling, right? Taking one instance and slapping a big negative label on yourself or someone else.
Yes. Instead of, I made a mistake, it becomes, I am a mistake. Or, I'm stupid. It makes the negativity feel permanent.
Okay, what's next?
Emotional reasoning. This one's tricky. It's believing something is true just because you feel it very strongly.
So like, I feel really anxious about this flight, therefore flying must be incredibly dangerous.
Precisely. Or, I feel inadequate, so I must be inadequate, even if there's lots of evidence you're competent. Your feelings become the proof.
It's like emotions override logic. Then there are the should statements.
Ah, Yes, should, shouldn't, must, mustn't, holding these really rigid rules about how you and maybe other people ought to behave.
And when reality doesn't match those
You
rules.
end up feeling guilty or frustrated or angry. It sets up these unrealistic expectations.
Okay. Then there's personalization and blaming. Kind of two sides of a coin.
Sort of. Personalization is taking too much responsibility for negative things you didn't really cause, like a child thinking their parents arguing is their fault.
Right. Taking it all on yourself.
And blaming is the opposite. Avoiding any personal responsibility and putting all the fault onto others, even when it's not fair.
It's a tricky balance, finding the right amount of responsibility. What about minimizing and magnifying?
Yeah, this is about distorting the importance of things. Minimizing means downplaying your good points or achievements, like, oh, anyone could have done that.
Discounting the positive.
Exactly. And magnification is the opposite, exaggerating your flaws or mistakes or making negative situations seem way worse than they are.
And catastrophizing fits in here.
It's a form of magnification, yeah. Focusing on the absolute worst possible outcome, no matter how unlikely it actually is. A small worry becomes a total disaster in your head.
Right. Turning a molehill into a mountain. Okay, and then there are ways we sort of assume the worst.
Definitely. Like overgeneralizing,
Yeah.
you take one single negative event and turn it into a never-ending pattern.
For example, if you get rejected for one date, you think, I'll always be alone, nobody wants me.
Exactly that. That one event now defines your entire future in your mind. Very painful. Then there's disqualifying the positive. This is where positive things happen. Or you get positive feedback, but you insist it doesn't count for some reason.
So if someone gives you a compliment, you think, oh, they're just being nice, or they have to say that.
Right. You find a way to dismiss it so it doesn't challenge your negative view. It's like wearing negativity goggles.
And mental filtering, is that similar?
It is. It's focusing only on the negative details and filtering out all the positive ones, like getting great feedback on a project, but obsessing over one tiny critical comment.
That one drop of ink spoils the whole glass of water kind of thing.
That's a perfect analogy. It's crucial to realize, like you said earlier, these aren't usually conscious choices. They become automatic thought habits.
So just recognizing them is a huge first step.
Absolutely. And that's where things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, come in. CBT really focuses on identifying and then challenging these unhelpful thought patterns.
Helping people build more balanced, more realistic ways of thinking.
Exactly. The goal is often what's called cognitive restructuring, learning to notice those distorted thoughts and consciously create more helpful, realistic responses, especially when you're stressed.
So actively working to reframe things.
Precisely. You know, the sources also mention a couple of other interesting points. One is about gratitude traps.
Gratitude traps. How can gratitude be a trap?
Well, sometimes the pressure to always feel grateful or misunderstandings about it can actually lead to negative feelings, like guilt if you're struggling, I should be happy, grateful. Or it can even be used manipulatively in relationships.
Huh. That's an interesting twist. Never thought of it that way.
And there's also a mention of how these distortions might connect to narcissistic defenses.
How so?
In some cases, individuals might unconsciously use magnification, exaggerating their strengths, and minimization, downplaying weaknesses, to protect a fragile self-image.
Okay, interesting connection. And finally, there was a technique mentioned, decatastrophizing.
Yes, decatastrophizing. It's a specific technique used in therapy, especially for magnification and catastrophizing. It helps people examine those feared worst-case scenarios more realistically.
How does it do that?
By asking things like, okay, what is the actual likelihood of that happening? And if it did happen, how would you cope? What could you do? It brings things back into perspective.
Right. Breaking down the fear. So as you listen to all this, maybe reflect. Do any of these patterns sound familiar in your own thinking?
Do you catch yourself doing that all or nothing thing? Or maybe jumping to conclusions about what others think? Or dismissing compliments?
Think about one thought you've had recently that felt really negative or upsetting. After hearing about these distortions, could you maybe see that thought in a new light? Was there perhaps a thinking error involved? Share your insights in the comments on that question. We'd love to hear what you think.
Thanks for listening. Write us your opinion in the comments on that question. Subscribe to the channel to help more listeners reach our episodes. Thank you and have an amazing day.